Matthew says that when the Magi finally reached Jesus, they fell down and worshipped him. This isn't just a polite bow, this is face down worship. And it's a striking scene because these men don't fall down before a king in a palace, they fall down before a little child, perhaps only a few months old at this point, who's born into poverty. What drives the Magi to fall to their knees in worship? Well, I think at least one reason is that they experience the unexpected power of God. Now, Matthew's a careful writer, and he draws a striking parallel between this account of the Magi, right here at the beginning of his Gospel, and the story of the woman at Jesus' resurrection, right at the end of his Gospel account of Jesus. And we've got these kind of ingredients that make up these two stories. The Magi, who are Gentile foreigners, so they're not the kind of people you expect to pop up in a story about the King of the Jews. They are travelling to meet the newborn King of the Jews. And the power of God is evident as a star appears, signalling the birth of Jesus. The Magi see this star, this sign pointing to Jesus, and they rejoice at the sign. And then they meet Jesus and fall down in worship. Now look at the moments just after Jesus' resurrection in Matthew 28. The woman, who in the culture of the day wouldn't normally play a starring role, travel to Jesus' tomb. And the power of God is on show as the earth shakes and an angel of the Lord appears to them, telling them where to find Jesus. And at the news of this sign, at this symbol pointing their way, they rejoice and head off from the tomb. They meet Jesus on the way, and what do? They fall down to the ground, clasp his feet and worship him. Now I think Matthew begins his account of Jesus' life and ends it with these strikingly similar stories because he's telling us something really important. God's power works in unexpected ways. God can use his power to show himself to Magi and women, to social groups, to groups of outsiders who wouldn't normally be included in a story like this. And God can use his power to fling stars into space and shake the earth beneath our feet. God has the ability to do that. But what's so staggering about these two stories when we see them side by side is this: God's greatest expression of power is shown in the person of Jesus Christ. And look at how different God's use of power is to the world that Christ was born into. In Matthew 2, we see many examples of power. Perhaps the most obvious is the power of King Herod. From historical records, we know that King Herod was a bloodthirsty, ruthless, though rather insecure leader. He's notorious for killing a few of his own wives and children because he thought they were out to get him. But God's power is very different. This isn't the typical power of a king like Herod who intimidates and manipulates and demands worship. This is the power that humbles itself to be born as a fragile baby held in his mother's arms. This isn't the typical power of a king like Herod who decrees a child massacre just to protect himself. This is the power that is used in sacrificial service. In verse 2, Matthew tells us very carefully that the Magi have come to meet he who has been born King of the Jews. That very phrase appears again near the end of his gospel. And this time it's scribbled on a sign and placed above Jesus' head as he hung on the cross. This is the King who was born to die. This is the kind of power, this is the kind of king who can drive Magi to fall to their knees in worship. In a sense, you could say that when the Magi meet Jesus, they realize who he is and they worship better than they realized. They somehow saw this was the King born to die. And it's a great reminder for you and I. Jesus is the King born to die. He's the King, the Son of God, who uses all of his power to walk his way to the cross. This is the kind of king, this is the kind of power that can make us fall to our knees in joyful adoration.